Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Cars. I heard it.
Not for me, you didn't.
Rich, I've got a real serious public service announcement. I'd like to share it with you. It'll take about 3 minutes. Is that okay?
Oh, hey, it's your show, buddy. You share away.
All right. Well, Kia, Hyundai, those two car companies have had some serious problems with their engines failing. And this has made the CNBC, it's the Canadian Broadcasting Network. And class, you can go to YouTube and you can look up recalls, CNBC recalls. You won't believe it. We're talking about millions of vehicles that have been manufactured that are substandard. And in my opinion, it would be design and manufacturing techniques. What happens is these vehicles have airbag failures. They have failures that relate to fluid leaks. The fluid leaks are on the, come down onto the engine, hot engine. You park your car in your driveway and it catches on fire. Park your car in the garage, it catches on fire. Park your car in the parking garage at work, it catches on fire. The engine seize up while you're driving along the highway. Bang, the connecting rod bearings fail and the engine seizes up. It's not going to turn anymore. That engine is done, kaput. And so what do these manufacturers do? Well, instead of saying, yeah, this is pretty serious and we're afraid you're going to get killed, driving one of these substandard Asian vehicles, what we'll do is we're going to put in a sensor. And the sensor is a knock sensor. There are plenty of engines that have knock sensors. Mercedes does. And they use those knock sensors to tell if there's pre-ignition, meaning that the fuel is not of sufficient octane to prevent pre-ignition, ping, 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 or detonation, premature detonation within the combustion chamber. Well, they use that kind of a type of a sensor to tell when the connecting rod breaks, bang, and the engine has just failed. So now what they've done, instead of fixing the problem, they put a sensor, a knock sensor, on the engine. The dealer does it, free, and it tells you your engine just blew up. That is in lieu of fixing the problem. So it's a $5,500 or so problem to replace, not repair, replace the engine, this catastrophic failure. And what I'm telling you is manufacturers, you can't even hold them accountable. And then, of course, this great, big, tall building of, we'll call it the equivalent of the Department of Transportation for Canada. I mean, lots of employees, and they rely on consultants and vendors to figure out what's going on with these defective products, that are on the road. And they say, well, we just don't have the resources. We can't go after all this stuff. So the government can't help you. The factories won't help you. The dealers can't help you. And all they'll do is put a sensor on to tell you 3, 2, 1, boom. Oh, it just blew up. Outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. So, there are plenty of people now, and I'm thinking they're in the tens of thousands at least. That's my guess, of people who have these Hyundais and Kias that have these massive problems, and they're paperweights or they're boat anchors because the engines have blown up. The manufacturers won't settle. The manufacturers are, just hoping that you're just going to give up and sell the vehicle to someone else. That way they won't have to warranty it. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. Rich, you have been talking for years. There's nobody to call. There's nobody to call.
Yeah. Well, Vince, what you just described is nothing new that we haven't discussed. It's a combination of a bunch of things. Forced obsolescence, we coined that several years ago. The delegitimization of work, which I've talked about till I'm blue in the face. The term plausible deniability, lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a product or service, and giving free lunch to the elite. And the delegitimization of work, people, is the most important. They use a connection of dots for their purposeful agenda. When you demand, when you get certain people, when you do divide and conquer strategies, okay, basically they're looking, the elite are looking for sellouts for the tyrannical, totalitarian, socialist, communist, fascist agenda. So when people burn books, when they censor people, when they arrest dissidents, when they distract with bread and circuses, when they dumb down, like one example is math is racist, when they divide by groups. And I know personally we have given thousands of examples of all this and much more. But see, the delegitimization of work is part of the cancel culture, is part of the new America. It's part of these words that I just mentioned, the sellouts, the tyrannical, totalitarian, fascist system. Basically, when they demand with certain people, when I say they, you can call it the cabal, you can call it the elite, you can call it the establishment, it's the powers that be, okay? It doesn't matter what term you use. What they do is make people feel entitled to demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job based on what group you're in. So what that does is dilute hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications. What that does is doubt value. And then when people, the same people, demand no protection, rights, and restitution on the rule of law for the people who are affected and targeted, that gives carte blanche of basically no check and balances of runaway power. So what do? We change laws via precedents. It's happened everywhere, including, that's why we have lack of voter integrity. That's why we don't have a duly elected president. This is why we have a court system, our judges, who have thrown the people under the bus for their own personal gain. This is why we have a military who doesn't care about oath and duty and honor when there's thousands of pieces of evidence of election and voter fraud and foreign interference. So what we do is we enable and protect the big corporations, the big, most corrupt portions of government, and give them liability immunity. Not just destroying capitalism, but enforcing fraud, which used to have no statute of limitations. So we're basically legitimizing illegitimacy and fraud and fascism, which creates more wealth inequality. So what happens? These products and services gets passed down to the little people with no accountability. This is what happens when the elite turn the people into followers, into groupthink. Because all you want to do is defend your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun. These are all connected. And we give free lunch to the elite, and we suffer the divide and conquer strategies, and we get poorer, and we have less options because we have allowed and been deceived by this political correct deception. I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face regarding this political correctness. We're literally reaping the consequences of decades of inaction towards political correctness because people are afraid to be called controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorist, anti-Islamist phobe. Because we're afraid to be called those names. They're all connected. Everything has allowed the rule of law to be eliminated. Intelligence agencies and rule of law to sell out the little people, to be sold to the highest bidder, to allow the perception to be manufactured of self-importance and self-preservation for the people, the lieutenants, willing to sell out the American people. I mean, on this broadcast alone, I can't think of how many examples we've given of hypocrisies, double standards, and brainwashing. I don't have a calculator that works that high. Oh, by the way, math is racist, so I can't talk about that. We're living a cognitive dissonance reality show where humanity is devolving into stupid, where a lie can reach its full potential with rewards if you're from the right group, but if you ask certain questions from the other group and tell the truth, it becomes illegal. Every example that we mention, whether it be about cars, any product, any service, is digressing, is on a downhill slope. And this all happens because of it's all connected: forced obsolescence, delegitimization of work, the plausible deniability of lowering the bars of standards and expectations regarding the rule of law, giving elite free lunch, where in return we get lack of prosperity, lack of options, and divide and conquer strategies, so we create more chaos and infighting and poison us against each other as per the elite. And this is what we have. And it's not going to get better unless people not just wake up, but have the guts and the courage to speak up. In other words, you have to have the guts to be willing to be hated. You remember my PICK acronym, folks? I talked about how this should be the number one criteria for getting a job, and that's especially for government work. And that's the first letter of the acronym PICK is patriotism. A desire for freedom, liberty, justice, the rule of law, the Constitution, pursuing happiness. We can't defend a republic in the name of a reset. Qualifications must matter. Hard work, proven results. We should be judged by those standards of how hard we work. And intelligence should be about logic, common sense, transparency, to pass that on to other people and other generation. But it's not just book smarts and grade smarts. It's street smarts. It's foresight smarts. It's nature smarts. We have to have that balance between nature and technology, which we have lost here in America. And probably the most important part is courage. PIC. You can call it guts, call it whatever you want. You got to have, as an American, maybe you have to be a little badass, like some of these sheriffs that are coming forth in red states saying that we have sanctuary counties. Those are the sheriffs that should be patted on the back. You should say thank you. Drop off a $100 bill and give them a gift certificate at the cop shop in your town. Say thank you to these people. We need to be American again. We needed to be hated for telling the truth versus wanting to be loved for blowing smoke up someone's keister. We have to have open loyalty to our country. And we got to stop passing the buck, which is done so often, not just in big corporate America, but our government. That's what we need. And Vince, if we don't go in that direction, you can do shows 5 days a week on these examples of quality and opportunity and options being reduced for the people. Vince?
Yep. And I've got a specific recommendation on what to do if you've got a Kia or a Hyundai, actually two of them, very quickly when we come back. And this applies to a lot of different problems that we're having. This is USA Prepares. Rich Scheben with us. I'm Vin Finelli. So in the fighting back department, what do you do? And if you've got a vehicle, and this could be any vehicle, not just Kia and Hyundai, but if you have a vehicle with a small engine with these little four bangers with a turbocharger, and turbocharged engines run hotter because the oil is running through the turbocharger, which is powered by the exhaust, which is, like 1,500 degrees. So those engine oils run hotter. And if you look up the oil change frequency recommended by Kia and Hyundai, you'll find that 7,500 miles is typical for a four-cylinder, little tiny four-cylinder engine in these vehicles. If it were mine, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if it were mine, I would consider this. And don't blame me if your engine blows up, because these are substandard engines. What I would do is I would change the oil using full synthetic oil, name brand oil, full synthetic, and they recommend 5W20 or 5W30. 5 means 5 winter. The oil acts as a viscosity of SAE5 in the winter, and 20, which is thicker, in the summer. I would move to 5W30. It's a little thicker in the summer, and that's the problem, or one of the problems. You want more oil protection. So I would use 5W30 if it were mine. Okay, I'm not telling you what to do, and don't blame me if it blows up. Also, I would not change my oil every 7,500 miles. I would change it at the latest every 5,000. Now, we service these vehicles, these particular brands, and we recommend strongly to the owners of them 5,000-mile oil changes maximum. Absolutely do not exceed it. And they have not blown up yet. So that's what we do. We use 5W30, not 5W20. 5W20, in my opinion, is too thin. And the reason that the automobile manufacturers recommend a thinner weight oil like 520 instead of 5W30 is because they can get like just a fraction of a percent better miles per gallon, because it's easier to push thinner oil through the engine than it is to push a little bit thicker oil through the engine. But a little bit thicker oil has more lubricating ability and can sustain higher engine temperatures. So those are my thoughts. Also, make sure you use a top quality oil filter and drip all the oil out of the engine. Let it drain overnight. Don't bring it to the Chinese factory outlet for an oil change and have one of their fully trained engineers change your oil, because they may damage your car, and we've seen it over and over and over. So do it yourself. Those are my thoughts. By the way, we're not taking calls today. Rich is with us, so no calls today. Thank you. Rich, any quick comments about what I just said to preserve the life of your hard-earned vehicles?
Well, I don't disagree. It's different depending on the machinery, too. Like my generator, I'll use a 5W. I'll change viscosity in the winter versus summer for my generator because it's outside, and it's easier to do that. But, keep in mind, with everything that's happening today, you can see the trends, because I look at math, I look at trends. We've talked about in great detail and specificity about robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, where there's less people involved, and that's synonymous to more liability immunity. So expect these trends to continue, where there's not going to be any accountability at the end of this rainbow, folks, just so you know. Vince?
Yeah, I was thinking about all these problems and what do you do? And I guess if I had an engine that blew up, I would find out where the board of directors live for the corporation. I'd go visit them. If they're, within a few hundred miles, I'd literally go visit them. And I'd put a note on their door, and, when the security guard tells me to take a hike, I say, well, I just need to leave a note. And just tell them I'll be back. I just want to say hi. And, maybe we can have a cup of coffee and talk about my car, and all the problems I'm having. So, and then if enough people do that, these guys will be terrified. And then the board of directors will go to the CEO, and the CEO will be directed to fix the problem. That's how it works. So, and if you look at what happens, if you look at the White House, there's fence after fence after fence with armed guards with machine guns on top of the roof, right? Cameras everywhere. You're not getting into the White House. You're not getting into the governor's mansion. The mayor doesn't want to talk to you. Mayors are now, their offices are in the police stations. They're surrounded by the police because they don't want to talk to us. They want to tell us what to do, but they don't want to be responsible. And you look at guys like Andrew Cuomo. What an embarrassment. Where is Lucille? Lucille, where are you? Where are these fathers of these young women who have been abused by these powerful men who want to take advantage of them? Where is Lucille? I'll be right back. My apologies, class. I tried to take copious notes during the bottom of the hour news to give you a concise recap of what the NASCAR driver said, but it was so convoluted that I couldn't sum up the salient points of his dribble. Rich Scheben, back to you.
Well, thanks. You were talking, I just want to make a quick comment on you breaking out Lucille for the lack of accountability in today's production and services industry, and that should be the case for everything. We've talked about this before. There's no accountability. Just like with illegal immigration, which is most people's number one issue today, where Biden is basically opening up the floodgates, has nothing to do with what gender someone is, what gender they identify as, what shade of skin pigmentation. Is that when we talk about vetting, it has to do with crime background, has to do with drug background, has to do with pedophilia trafficking background, has to do with skill sets, that type of thing. That's what people are very concerned of. So how we need to go about this is the people, because the rule of law is not helping. They're all bought and paid for. Look at the Supreme Court. They're just government workers getting a huge paycheck for doing absolutely nothing. They're 100% bought and paid for, blackmailed, or threatened. 100%. So what we need to do is when people come here, this is just an example of the Lucille, okay? The people, when there's an illegal immigrant that comes in, the judges and the lawyers involved, especially in those particular states who allow these people to come in, the people need to do a citizen's arrest and try them. Same thing with Big Pharma. How come billions of vaccine damage, billions of dollars? I've talked about this with the secret courts. This is all stuff from published articles in the public domain. I don't make anything up. Well, how come only 5% get benefits or beneficiaries of these courts for all the damage done to their families for vaccines? People, we're being played, we're being conned, we're being used. We are allowing the corrupt system, the mafia of the corrupt system, to have protection from the rule of law with liability immunity. It's up to the people to arrest these people because the judges are bought and paid for. How many articles has the alternative media given about the FBI and the DOJ? I think I have one or two I'm going to discuss today regarding no one does their job. They have all sold out to the highest bidder. Well, Vince, if it's okay with you, I'd like to discuss news and current articles, if I may, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have one quick question for you. In this discussion of the news, will you be covering Petaluma, California, banning more gas stations, meaning you can't build a new gas station in Petaluma, California? Are you going to be talking about that?
I wasn't, only because I have so much information, but I did read that article, and I think, go if you want to discuss that, absolutely, because since Biden came in, we have discussed, I have given articles in previous weeks where natural gas, gasoline, diesel, coal, basically everything is almost being purged and prices are going up because of the so-called quotas of green energy. And that's where we're going, folks, because it's not about freedom, it's not about jobs, it's not about controlling your own destiny. It's about depopulation, it's about forced austerity, it's about eliminating free market, supply and demand, crashing the economy, all the things that we've talked about. Vince, you want to discuss that quickly before I move on?
Sure. Just very quickly, class, because I think it's important. Why? Because a stake has been put in the ground, a line has been drawn. Petaluma, California, they are going to ban more gas stations. So if you decide you want to open up a business and plant a gas station in Petaluma, California, forget it. They say they've got 16 of them, and they've got 60,000 population there. They've got plenty of gas stations according to the city government. And they've decided that it's only a 5-minute drive from wherever you might be to the closest gas station. Now, that's assuming that you'd want to buy gas there. But what if you don't want to buy gas there? What if that's the highest price gas station and the lowest price gas station is a half hour away? They haven't taken that into account. The other thing is, they're saying that this is fostering electric vehicles. Yeah, it is. It is. So now we have the city government kind of pushing you into an electric vehicle because they're going to restrict the number of gas stations. They're encouraging electric charging stations to be added to gasoline, fossil fuel type gas stations, but they are not allowing you to build a new gas station to sell liquid fuel, only electricity. This is a problem for me. And what if you happen to have an investment, let's say, I don't know, how much is a vehicle on average worth? Let's say your average old clunker is worth 15 grand. What if you have an investment in that, or you have a new pickup truck that you spent $60, $70, $80,000 for, and you find out, in a few years you can't get fuel at a gas station in the city you're trying to drive through because they pulled them all out. What they're doing, in my opinion, is they are accepting bribes from the electric utility industry, so in favor of electric charging stations rather than gasoline fuel. That's a big problem for me. Electricity is not going to cut it. Class, there's not enough electricity being generated, nor does the grid have capacity to switch over to electric vehicles. It's not here, and it's not going to be here. This is nuts. And so these people who allegedly are representing your interests are not. So what do? So you avoid going to places like Petaluma, California. You tell the merchants, listen, I'd love to stop at your sub sandwich shop, your restaurant, or whatever I can't because of your government. We called for a national boycott of Sparta, Missouri, because they had a police department that was out of control. And you know what? People said, Vinny, are you trying to burn down the city? Are you telling people to boycott the barbershop? Everything because of the police? Yes. So when the city government goes out of control, what you do is you either visit them at their homes or you talk to the merchants and you say, I'm not going to spend my money here because your city government's out of control. And then the merchants beat up the city government and say, what are you guys doing? You're killing us. That's how it works. Rich?
Yeah, absolutely. And since you went on the subject of energy, I'll just start with some articles on that. First article is Joe Biden pledges himself to Operation Lockstep's goal of cutting off U.S. power. Now, for those of you who think I make these articles up, I try very hard to always mention my disclaimer. These are all published articles in the public domain. I try to use objective facts. I try not to use subjective emotional opinion or speculation or hearsay or rumors and gossip and first-hand or second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand information. I try to verify published articles that have credibility, okay? And here's an article just to follow up with that. Joe Biden rescinds Trump order banning Chinese involvement in the U.S. power grid. Look what happened to Texas, people, where they had basically an order not to go beyond 60% of capacity because of political correctness, because of the green energy quota. Can you imagine now? Did you hear this article? Let me repeat that again. Biden rescinds Trump order banning Chinese involvement in the U.S. power grid. And I've mentioned articles similar to this in the past. What this means, folks, is we're handing over the keys to our enemies who are buying our country on the U.S. power grid. I want you to wrap your head around that. That's the translation. See, this is why the powers that be want submissive conformity. And as long as we decide not to say anything, because you're afraid to be called racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, I know I try to be a little funny there, but it's true. As long as we keep kowtowing to a manufactured perception of an ideology that doesn't exist, there's going to be more units of measure of despair. Just look at everything from suicide to homicide to pedophilia to debt loads, lack of savings, lack of opportunity based only on what group you're in. So hard work, effort, proven results, and qualification mean nothing. More divide and conquer strategies, more elimination of rights. This is what happens when we don't speak up, people. And it's not going to get any better. I mean, here we've allowed literally we don't even have elections anymore. There's zero election integrity. There is no consumer confidence or trust in this system. It's about as low as you can get as far as future prosperity and opportunity, because we're seeing a consolidation of power, money, and control. When you live in a country where there's no more merit for advancement based on what group you're in, and they keep throwing more divide and conquer strategies, and the only advancement comes from the tattletales and the snitches who's willing to sell out your fellow Americans for their wealth. When you see when the whole world sees election heists in our country, election fraud, when it's so overwhelming and obvious, and they can see that we no longer have a rule of law, or our Constitution and Bill of Rights mean nothing, when free speech is gone, do you think anybody listening to this show, this broadcast, is going to be beneficiaries of what's coming? No. Basically, we're going to have no representation, no freedom, no liberty, no justice, no democracy, no rule of law, no protection of that rule of law, no rights and restitution. That's called a banana republic. And I want to remind you what we used to call banana republic not that many years ago when we were talking about other countries. That was a failed state. That's what we called it. A failed state. So, next article.
I've got a comment. I've got a quick comment.
Sure.
When years ago, when you and I had jobs, I'm talking like, 80s, 90s, that kind of thing. Probably you in the 90s, me in the 80s. I haven't had a job since 1989. But, the bank that I worked for was a large bank. And we were competing with JP Morgan, Chase, Citibank, Boney, which is Bank of New York, for Chicago, etc. And my job was in the computer department. My job was to make our computers better than JP Morgan, Chase, Citi, Boney, for Chicago, etc. So we would have a competitive advantage, and maybe the boss would say, wow, Vinny did a really good job, and Rich did a really good job, and let's recognize them, next time promotions or raises are considered. That's what it used to be like, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it like that?
Well, absolutely. It was called merit-based. It was called qualifications. It was called hard work, effort, per result. Absolutely.
Right. So that's what we did, and that's why we rose through our corporations, because they said, Rich is really doing a good job. Let's give him an attaboy, let's give him a raise, let's promote him, etc. Until it started to fall apart when they said, wait a minute, Rich doesn't have dreadlocks. And he doesn't, I think we're short on guys and gals with dreadlocks, so we're gonna have to shuffle who gets what. And, I'm just using that as an example. So I just went into the kitchen, top off some coffee, and I got the message from the family that call came in, and I can get my COVID vaccine. They've got one for me. Can you imagine that? Next step is going to be, if this progresses, I guess the next step would be we get a call saying, we're coming to your house because we know where you are, and you will get the vaccine. Isn't that the next step, Rich? I'm not getting a vaccine.
Well, it's pretty scary. I wasn't pulling any punches when I said that it's not a left-right paradigm. It really is an authoritarian, totalitarian, fascist, corrupt, tyrannical, communist insurrection that we're seeing in front of our eyes. This is why there's no consumer confidence or trust in the system. When everybody and every institution at the highest levels has been bought and paid for, blackmailed, or threatened, what we're really doing is spitting on the graves of over 1 million combat soldiers who gave their life for our freedoms and liberties. Vince, if it's okay with you, I got lots of news. Is it okay if I start racing through some of this stuff?
You bet.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next article. I love the title. Joe Obama and Pelosi present $1.9 trillion bailout bill under auspices of COVID relief. Now, basically what this means, folks, this is when they talk about the Pelosi payoffs, basically it means it's code or translated into money laundering and paybacks for favors and graft. And we've talked about the Ayn Rand quotes many times in the past. Basically, 9% only is going to COVID health spending. That's really easy math. Oh, pardon me, math is racist. I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to take a chance. 91% is going to Planned Parenthood bailouts for the blue states like New York and California, the unions, the arts. You really need to read these articles. What we're really doing is we're this COVID crisis is replacing the housing banking crisis of 2008 and giving favors to the big boys. You know, it's just like, remember all the too big to fail, too big to jail, the big corporations, the big banks? Well, not only like zombie companies. A zombie company is basically defined as a company that can't even pay their interest on their own debt. So all these companies, and the banks especially, not only are they being artificially manipulated and kept alive, but they're also giving record bonuses to their people via taxpayer money. Keep in mind, we, the people, pay for everything via taxes and inflation, and we're getting hit hard. And, of course, a lot of this stuff goes under the table to unions, to PACs, to special interests, the whole works. It really is really appalling, the crime in our face that's happening against we, the people. All right, next article. Microsoft and Intel and Adobe team up to eliminate human knowledge that halt all questions under the guise of stopping disinformation. Let me translate that for you. Basically, you're not supposed to listen to the alternative media. The powers that be are going to tell you what to think, what to say, how to do it, who to be with, when to go out, what to say, everything. That's basically what that means. Next, Joe Biden holds presser on COVID vaccines. Stunning. Only 669 people are watching, but yet this guy got 81 million votes. Yes, I am reading the key points on this article. This man got 81 million votes for president, the most ever, but no one ever watches him. No one goes to his rallies. No one listens to him, but he got 81 million votes. You betcha. Yeah, we all believe that. Next, Virginia College president suspends entire team for kneeling, forfeits important game. That's actually good news, folks. When you see our sheriffs sticking up for a Second Amendment, when you see college presidents sticking up for the rule of law, for the Bill of Rights, for the Constitution, for our military, especially the million-plus combat soldiers who died for our freedoms, you need to go to these people, shake their hand, and say thank you. You need to donate to their few schools of people who have the guts to do this. And because I'm looking at the time here, I got to move on. Ted Cruz says, quote, criminals, murderers, and rapists that are entering on Biden's most radical immigration plan proposed in history. And the people, we the people, I read these articles, they're very concerned. Now, I'm going to just read some of the things that was mentioned out of one state from the LA Times. Keep in mind, this is the LA Times that admitted to all this, and this is just one state. In fact, probably one county, most of this information. 40% of all workers in LA County, 10.2 million people, are working for cash and not paying taxes. This is because they are predominantly illegal immigrants working with a green card. Even Donald Trump said that. Of course, he was correct. Now, it's not just 10 million, 15 million people like the powers that be say we have for illegal immigrants. From my math and my observation and what I read, is probably more like 30 to 40 million illegal immigrants in this country. And I will finish the Los Angeles Times quotes when we come back after this break. We appreciate you being here. Thanks, folks.
Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. Class tomorrow, Gwyneth's going to be with us for an hour. And Kyle's going to be joining me. We're going to talk about tips from the book. Thursday, we're going to be talking about domestic engineering. Kathy and Sharon are going to be doing that. Friday's Captain John Reagan. Rich, I had a quick question for you. Garden seeds. Have you started your seeds yet for your garden, or do you buy plants?
Yeah, no, I only buy plants if I have a few holes in my garden that I could, stick a plant in here and there. But I have started my peppers just a few days ago. End of this month, I will start my tomatoes, and then a couple of weeks after that, I'm going to start my broccoli, my cauliflower, my cabbage family, if you will. And a lot of my seeds, like my spinach and my heirloom lettuces, I let go to seed, and it just voluntarily comes up. I have so much spinach already germinated outside my garden. It's unbelievable. So that's kind of how we do it. We use it. Keep in mind, folks, use heirloom open-pollinated seeds. And if you want a real cheap greenhouse, buy UV plastic and put it over a ridgepole and basically make your whole roof an upside-down U and take two 16-foot, cattle panels and wire them together over a ridgepole. Put your UV-treated plastic over that, and you have a very inexpensive greenhouse. I built a 40-foot greenhouse for $500. Now, granted, it's about 15 years old. I call it my old jalopy, but it handles a pretty decent snow load, and it works very well. So I recommend people doing that as we enter garden season, Vince.
And how long does the UV treated plastic or UV resistant plastic last you in Montana?
You're coming in and out, Vince. Can you repeat that question, please?
Okay. All right. Sure. How long does that ultraviolet ray treated plastic last you, the clear plastic, as the covering for your greenhouse?
Well, what I do is I've got two layers, only because the first layer got a few holes in it. The cats would climb it and things like that. And instead of replacing it, I'll just put a second layer over it to cover the holes, and that works fine. So, the key to UV-treated plastic is to retain heat, but more importantly, not burn your plants. And it really works great. Here in Montana, it's kind of like, it's analogous to solar panels. If you are down south where it's really hot, the temperatures are really bad, UV plastic and solar panels will not last very long. Typically, and pardon my solar panel analogy, a solar panel on average in southern states will lose about 1% to 2% of efficacy or functionality per year. Here in Montana, that's not the case. I know people who've had solar panels for 30 years and they haven't lost 1% of functionality. So it all depends. The answer for most questions is, of course, it depends. Depends on your seasonality, depends on your latitude, depends on your elevation, depends on how much sun you have around you. So, here in Montana, even though we have very hot summers, things last a little longer than most parts of the country because of our seasonality variety, Vince.
Yeah, I just wanted to let our class know that we have started our seeds, and you should probably consider doing the same thing, class. You can buy heirloom seeds inexpensively. You can save them from year to year to year. And I might be talking about this more tomorrow, but what I've decided to do, Rich, is take some styrofoam cups. We had some left over from the expo years and years and years ago. We had some 12-ounce coffee cups and styrofoam, and we had some 6.4-ounce cups that we weren't going to use for anything. So we filled them with potting soil, put the seeds in them, put them under fluorescent light. One tube is soft white, the other tube is cool white, so it's blended for the red spectrum and the blue spectrum. And that's what my research tells me is the best combination, rather than just cool white deluxe or cool white or soft white. Have one of each tube, one cool white, one soft white. And what I did was I put the seeds that, even the ones I'm going to sow, like the lettuces and the corn, I put them in these styrofoam cups because I want to see if they germinate. I'm not going to waste the space in the garden if these seeds don't grow that are, a few years old. So what I'm saying is I'm trying to do it scientifically. I'm not just throwing seeds out there and using up garden real estate if I don't think that the plants will germinate. So we started the peppers. We've started, I planted some tea trees, TEA. I planted some moringa trees and plants. I planted a whole bunch of styrofoam cups, and they're under this 4-foot tube fluorescent light, 2 inches above the cups for now. We'll see how it works. I planted some really hot peppers, and some sweet peppers and all kinds of tomatoes, beefsteak, Rutgers. I even planted some non-heirloom seeds just to make sure that I know how they grow competitively. So That's the plan. Corn, different kinds of corn, Dent, King, etc. So I want to know before these plants go out, what germinates and what doesn't, so I don't waste any space. Rich, any comments about that? Have you taken that approach?
Well, I don't use grow lights. I just put my seeds next to my wood stove, and you can germinate pretty much anything just from warmth. And once they pop their little heads out of the soil, then I'll put them in my solarium, which I heat with convection from my cabin, and it works quite well. Real soon, in a few weeks, I'll be able to leave the door open and literally heat my cabin with the convection I get from the solarium, so it works great. Hey, Vince, if it's okay with you, I'm looking at the clock. Can I go back to the news?
Yep, go.
Okay. I was talking before the break, folks. I was talking about Ted Cruz was saying that criminals and rapists are entering on Biden's most radical immigration plan ever. And I was literally quoting the Los Angeles Times, where 95% of warrants for murder are for illegal aliens. 75% of people on most wanted list in Los Angeles are illegal aliens. This is all coming from the Los Angeles Times. Not Rich, not Vince, not made up. These are all published data, everything. Published data in the public domain. Over two-thirds of all births in Los Angeles County are to illegal alien Mexicans on Medi-Cal whose births are paid for by you, the taxpayers. And, of course, not 35% of all the inmates in California detention centers are Mexican nationals, which are here illegally. And over 300,000 illegal immigrants in Los Angeles County are living in garages. And the FBI reports half of the gang members in Los Angeles are most likely illegal aliens from south of the border. Plus, 60% of all occupants of HUD properties are illegal. Now, I can go on and on with these statistics. In L.A. County, 5.1 million people speak English, 3.9 speak Spanish. These are all less than 2% of illegal aliens are picking our crops, but 29% are on welfare. And this is not just California, it's Florida, it's New York, it's other states. So these are, I can take the next 10 minutes to mention these published statistics in the public domain by the Los Angeles Times, but you get the gist, folks. When we don't vet, when it's very obvious that the United Nations that is running the puppets in America, the bought and paid for puppets, want to take down America, that's how you do it. That's how the Bolsheviks did it. This has all happened in many different, when you read Alinsky, when you read Marx, when you read Cloward and Piven, the Frankfurt School, this is all the playbook, the template, the flow chart. This is the blueprint for destruction. And you have to speak up. It has nothing to do with what gender they are, what skin pigmentation they are, what gender they identify as, what sexual orientation or religion. It's just a vetting process to keep the people safe, because who gets affected? The little people. Okay, next article. Biden DHS secretary says loving parents send their kids across Mexico border. That's in quote, loving parents. Let me decode that for you. That basically means send your little kids over for the pedophile trade, and we'll take good care of them. Next. Ignored by the media and the FBI. You heard over the break the commercial about how the FBI is doing such a great job, but they ignored the Antifa and BLM activists who are posting photos and bragging online about storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. This was planned. This was scripted by Blantifa, and yet the media and the FBI are bragging about going after Trump supporters on January 6th when this was all theater, proven many times, including Mr. Sullivan, who admitted it. Next, they didn't do their jobs. Conservative commentator D. Roy Murdoch puts blame on federal judges for role in January 6th. Next, artificial meat company claims you can buy salami made from human flesh of famous actors. Now you can have your cannibalism packaged, people. Yes, this is a published article in the public domain. Not making this stuff up. And it's Black History Month, but yet Amazon removes Justice Thomas's documentary from the Prime Video store. We actually have a real American patriot, Justice Thomas, in the Supreme Court. And what are they doing? They're dissing him. Next, and I wish I don't have time, folks. I got to move on. Pardon me. Next article, eviction moratorium ruled unconstitutional. Largest tsunami of evictions in U.S. history incoming. So not only have the people who bought these triplexes, these fourplexes, these sixplexes, these apartment complexes not been getting paid for over a year, now they're going to start evicting the people who didn't pay for them. See, they don't care who the chaos and the infight comes from. They don't care. They don't represent your group. Their job is to be a divide and conquer strategist. Their job is to be a pot stirrer. They don't care who you are or what group you come from. There's a very small amount of elite people, and they're going to do everything in their power, just like it's the white males. But yet you don't see the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and Bill Gates and Fauci and Zuckerberg and Zucker and Bezos. You don't see, how come we don't just say, okay, well, no one can have a net worth of over $5 million. Let's enforce that right now. How come you're not hearing that? They're white males. Why don't we hear it? I think we can connect the dots, right, folks? Next. Well, unbelievable, in quotes, watch creepy HHS nominee Dr. Levine dodges Senator Rand Paul questions twice about endorsing the unthinkable for you, which is even 3-year-olds can choose their gender identity. I wish I could. I don't have time, folks. Next, health foreign doctors caught prescribing sex-change drugs to UK children online. Are you seeing what's happening, people? Next, Democrats block Representative Andy Barr's amendment to prevent COVID-19 relief funds from going to China. Next, Biden gang deals with Ukraine. 125 million of your taxpayer dollar money going to Ukraine right now. We'll be right back after this break, people.
So in 1970, Raphael Edward was born in Calgary, Canada. His father came from Cuba. In 2016, he ran for president. Raphael Edwards' last name is spelled C-R-U-Z, Cruz. Raphael Edward Cruz, a.k.a. Ted Cruz, was not born in the United States. However, he ran for president. Rich?
Yeah, well, look at our vice president. She's not eligible either. Heck, the whole system is not legitimate. This was a 100% stolen election. The whole world saw it live. I gave 1,200 pieces of evidence, and obviously we don't have time, but I'm going to go to more news. You know, the rules are being set by the people who have theirs, folks. Okay, next article. Vulnerable. The Federal Reserve payment system crashed due to operational error. So they're going to quote it as something that's not their fault. That's how they do it. The whole system is vulnerable to hacking, people. The grid, the economic system, everything. And the only beneficiaries are going to be the elite and not you, because they have their plausible deniability and they have their people bought and paid for at the very top. Next article. World News, World Economic Forum shouted down on Twitter for suggesting COVID-19 improves cities all around the world. Well, if you look at all the lockdowns, sure, it might be a little quieter, maybe a little less bus fumes and stuff. But look at all the people who lost their jobs, who lost their businesses, who lost their wealth, who are filing bankruptcy. Look at the homicide rates. Look at the suicide rates. Look at all the units of measure of despair, like drug use. And that includes pharmaceutical drugs. As Dr. Shealy always says, the third leading cause of death in America is the American medical system. Next article. Cult of LGBTQ. I don't even know how many letters I got on top of this anymore. Trans female MMA fighter who destroyed female competitor is the bravest history in the world. So basically, a biological man who identified as a female went into the fight and beat the crap out of this lady who's a born female, and they are calling him, the powers that be, the bravest athlete in history. Now, I know, again, this is where I got to say my disclaimer. Published articles, public domain, all truth. I verify as much as I can. I try to get, when I mention these articles, I try to mention these find these on multiple sites and verify the credibility, okay? Not made up. Next article. Michigan National Guard troops in D.C. hospitalized after Democrat-run city repeatedly feeds them raw, undercooked meat with metal shavings in it. Military, can you see what's going on? Can you see what's happened? You were supposed to have the people's back for election fraud and foreign interference. Do you think the powers that be have your back? Really? They threw out who knows how many of your votes, because I mentioned these articles on the air, that they threw out and didn't even include, or they changed the vote. They switched the vote. I mentioned tons of those articles. Next, turmeric from Bangladesh sometimes contains lead-laced chemical compounds. It doesn't even if it's a healthy product, people, you got to be careful where you get it. There's no rule of law. There's rule of the highest bidder. You have to grow or harvest your own food. Okay, remember, I've talked about this many times. Food, water, shelter, and energy. Try to make as much of that as you can. Next article. FBI becomes a national joke. Once an esteemed agency is now posting wanted alerts for a young woman who walked through the U.S. Capitol, despite the fact that even today and for weeks, we've mentioned articles about Blantifa literally creating this. This was scripted. But the FBI and the mainstream media ignores that. Next article. Your kids would be better off feral than going to schools that make them anti-racist Americans. Next article. Teachers Union president who led school shutdowns caught dropping daughter off at a private school. Hypocrisy, double standards. You guys need to get your people together in your neighborhoods and create home schools. 15 years.
Rich Scheben's with us. And, Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. Keep in mind, folks, most laws are made under the guidance of benevolence or phony benevolence. Count the Patriot Act, things of that nature. Everything's meant to reduce our freedoms, our liberties, eliminate the rule of law, create plausible deniability, all the things that we always talk about. And when I was talking about that article about the teachers union president who basically led school shutdowns, lied to the American people, caught dropping off his daughter at a private school, this is why you hear me talk about practice what you preach laws. Because hypocrisy and double standards is almost like a category on this broadcast. Because the powers that be are such gaslighters and liars. Okay, next article. I'm running out of time. I'm already going to have to cut short and shortcut my shortcuts. But we are witnessing a last-minute mass exodus before the final collapse of our major cities. Well, Vince and we've been talking about this for a very long time, and that's why I talk about buying 20 to 40 acres. We talk about being self-sufficient. We talk about food, water, shelter, energy, trying to make as much of that yourself, relearning the old 19th century skills and dovetailing those with 21st century technology, especially now when everything is hackable, the grid. We have a president, supposedly, I use the term in quotes with an asterisk, giving our keys to our electric grid to our enemies. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Next article, Senate Parliamentary says, including $15 minimum wage in Democrats' COVID package violates budget rules. Well, I don't know if this is going to pass. I heard it won't, but they're probably going to bring it back. This is basically a tool of fascism. You eliminate small business. You make sure they don't get too big. You create $15 minimum wage, and this way the big corporate oligarchies do not have competition. It's very easy math. Oop, math is racist. My bad. Forget I said that last sentence. Next article. Huge breaking news. Judge rules Maricopa County must provide 2.1 million ballots from 2020 to Arizona Senate for audit. Well, let's see it happen. You know, when you hear a good judge, folks, or a good lawyer, like a Robert Barnes, you know, a constitutional lawyer, when you hear a judge sticking up for the rule of law like this from Maricopa County, you need to thank him. You need to possibly, I don't know if he needs donations, but you need to shake his hand and say, thank you for being an American, because there's so few judges. I mean, our Supreme Court is bought and paid for. I mean, take away Thomas and Alito and maybe Gorsuch, our Supreme Court is bought and paid for. They're blackmailed. Next, Maricopa County releases junk audit reports, 12% ballot adjudication. We've read about, I've given these articles where ballot adjudication was up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% in some jurisdictions. That basically means that if they don't like the way the vote counts are going, it goes to a pile where a human counter says, oh, that's Joe Biden. Oh, that's ambiguous. Oh, throw that into Joe Biden's pile. That's what has happened, people. Next, Pennsylvania poll watchers testified about election fraud and irregularities in 2020 election. Then the Attorney General, special agents harass these people and sue them for telling the truth. Folks, we are in a USSR Nazi Bolshevik system right now. You better speak up, or else you can just tell your kids and grandkids, kick them out of the house now, because they have no chance of a life. Next, after public pressure, New Hampshire's AG office rescinds plan to move voting machines to state capital for investigation. And the next article about New Hampshire, Attorney General office wants to take custody of Wyndham voting machines and take them away for audit. Let's do it. Let's stop talking about it, people. We're tired of the talk. Do it. Next, I'm going to switch gears to healthcare here. Psychiatrist says the world is suffering from mass delusional psychosis because of the pandemic, because they're afraid of getting it. It's kind of the opposite of FOMO, fear of missing out. This is just the opposite. And there's an article here from the U.S. National Library of Medicine of the National Institute of Health. You heard that correct. And it's talking about face masks in the COVID-19 era. And it's a very lengthy article, but I'm just going to get to the conclusion and read what it says. The existing scientific evidences challenge the safety and efficacy of wearing face masks as preventative intervention for COVID-19. The data suggests that both medical and non-medical face masks are ineffective. Yes, I added two more. To block human-to-human transmission of viral and infectious disease such as SARS and COVID, blah, blah, blah. Supporting against the usage of face masks. Against. Wearing face masks has been demonstrated to have substantial adverse physiological and psychological effects. These include hypoxia, hypercapnia, shortage of breath, increased acidity and toxicity, activation of fear and stress, rise in hormones, immunosuppression, fatigue, headaches, decline in cognitive performance, predisposition for viral and infectious disease, chronic stress, anxiety, depression, long-term consequences of wearing face masks can cause health deterioration. Developing and progressing of chronic diseases and premature health. Governments, policymakers, and health organizations should utilize prosper and scientific evidence-based approach with respect to wearing face masks, which the latter is considered as preventative interventional for public health. People, there's no evidence that face masks help anything. It's to increase your units of measure of despair. It's to eliminate your individualism. How many times have I actually given articles and signs from around the world saying, don't look at each other. Look down on the ground. They don't want you to get together. They don't want you to communicate. They don't want you to share information. They don't want you to be individuals. They don't want families. They don't want synergy. They don't want unity. They say these words, but they mean the opposite. Okay, I got to move on. I'm running out of time here. Next article. Special report. COVID-19 vaccine found to cause neurological disorders. Next. Health immunologist warns Pfizer and Moderna coronavirus vaccines may cause neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's. Next. Pfizer is threatening governments around the world and demanding ransom to protect against future vaccine injury lawsuits. So Pfizer and these companies are going around the world demanding for military-based collateral, bank reserve collateral, embassy collateral for vaccines and demanding liability immunity. In other words, sovereign nations are selling out to big pharma and big corporations. That's fascism, folks. This is happening in real live time. You better wake up. Next. Fauci says vaccinated people still can't dine indoors or go to theaters. I know you think I'm making this stuff up. I promise you I am not. Published articles in the public domain. Next, hospitals in France forced to slow down COVID vaccinations as healthcare workers fall ill in droves. Fall ill in droves. I'm not repeating words because I'm being condescending to you people. I want to make sure that you're hearing these published articles in the public domain. Next article. UK government reports over 240 deaths shortly after coronavirus vaccination. 240 deaths shortly after coronavirus vaccination. Next article. Georgia mother of two dead after receiving COVID vaccine. Next article. UK health authorities announced not a single case of flu detected this year. Now, do you remember, people, when I gave articles like flu was almost wiped out here in the U.S., lowest levels in 130 years, oh, it's a miracle, 23 Americans tested positive for flu last week compared to over 15,000 cases reported last year at the same time? Why is that, people? Why is that? It's because everything is going into the COVID category. Remember the acronym PIC. Pneumonia, influenza, COVID. Everything's going into COVID. Remember the fruits and the goats being swabbed for false positives. Coca-Cola. We've gone through all this, people. That's why they use a PR test that they can change the unit of measures and variance. It's for the agenda. Every baby in the forest knows this. Next article. Health report. Okay, I just mentioned that one. Next report. Big pharma whistleblowers are coming out revealing the dangers of mRNA vaccines. We've talked in great detail about these vaccines. Remember, I asked Dr. Norm Shealy, who's on this show, on this broadcast, on Mondays, Dr. Shealy, why are we seeing so much autism, so much Down syndrome? Why are we seeing so much cancer? Why is life expectancy going down? Do you remember his answer? Vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. And actually, I'm not saying that 3 times. He said it 3 times. Next article. Women recently injected with the experimental COVID vaccines are showing symptoms of breast cancer. Do you remember with Merck or with Australia? They were actually sending signals of they were showing up positive for HIV. Next. White House working with big tech to suppress so-called vaccine misinformation. No, they want to basically sell you the propaganda and the hoaxes, and no one else is allowed to say the truth. That is the translation. Next article, Merck to help produce rival Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. Do you remember I gave kudos to Merck because just a few weeks ago they say vaccines don't work? Well, now they're teaming up with J&J. But forget about the fact that India is getting rid of the vaccines. South Africa is getting rid of the vaccines. Bill Gates have been kicked out of multiple countries because of the vaccines. You know Bill Gates, the guy who publicly is calling for a major depopulation. That guy. Yeah. People, we have to. Vince, I gotta ask a question here before the break. With all this evidence, all this hypocrisy, all these double standards, people pushing a certain agenda, while they're saying they want depopulation, or like Zuckerberg, he got caught on a hot mic basically questioning the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, but yet these same people are pushing it. Vince, how can this be allowed? How can they literally change laws under the guise of this phony benevolence, and they're not even practicing what they preach? How come these people aren't even arrested when they're being kicked out of countries? I want you to answer that after the break, right. Vince.
Yeah, I can formulate a bill, one-sentence bill during the break, and I'll let you know what that bill is to answer that question about how can this happen. We'll be right back with Rich Scheben. By the way, Bill Gates, largest farmland owner in the United States of America. The Ron Gibson channel on BitChute is carrying USA Prepares. And one of his most viewed features on the Ron Gibson channel on BitChute, BITCHUTE, where USA Prepares is featured. We have the most viewed broadcast, and I want to thank Ron Gibson for that. So, class, if you want to have an alternative to YouTube, there is one which is called BitChute, BITCHUTE. Ron Gibson, RON space GIBSON, the Ron Gibson channel. Thank you, Ron, for carrying us for years and years and years, and all of your hard work and making sure that USA Prepares gets wider dissemination. And of course, you can also listen to USA Prepares at its source, which is Genesis Communications Network, GCNLIVE.com, GCNlive.com. The archives are there. You can listen to us live. And I want to thank GCN for carrying USA Prepares and all the hard work that the team at GCN with Nathan and Jason and Ted Anderson et al. Do for us. And there's Brad and Alex and so many wonderful engineers there. George, thank you for all that you do for USA Prepares. So to answer your question, I've come up with a one-sentence bill. I wrote it during the commercial break. Quote, this is my bill. Okay. Quote, any and all sponsors of any bill that has a deceptive title is guilty of treason against the American people and is guilty of a capital crime. End quote. Now, let me tell you just what that means very briefly. A capital crime in America there's a punishment for a capital crime, and that punishment is reserved for the worst of the worst criminals. It's carried out by methods such as lethal injection, electric chair, gas chamber, and sometimes even a firing squad. To further define what I'm talking about, the definition of treason and sedition mean disloyalty or treachery to one's country or its government. Treason is any attempt to overthrow the government or impair the well-being of the state to which one owes allegiance. So if a sponsor of a bill or the writer of a bill or the sponsors of a bill try to use deception, obfuscation, lying in the title of the bill, like the Patriot Act, for example, that to me sounds like treason. These are my opinions. These are not the opinions of anyone else with whom I'm associated with. Those are my opinions. So, sounds like treason, and there should be a penalty commensurate with the act of treason, lying wholesale to the American people and the rest of the world to the disadvantage of the government, which is, we the people, is treason. Rich Scheben, any comments?
Well, absolutely. It's just like what you said when Bill Gates is number one farmland holder. Bezos is number two. It's basically for food shortage, starvation. It's all part of the depopulation, eugenics, genocide, war. We're in 3 wars now. Basically, when you starve people out, it's just like attack strategies on medieval castles. On how especially when the French and the British used to used to be in wars back in those medieval days, they'd surround a castle and they'd starve them out. Keep in mind, these are the same people that are literally saying that they want you to eat bugs. You know, we've talked a lot about population control, but voluntary population control, ideas and solutions about it, so people could have a good life.
Uh-oh. Did we just lose Rich Scheben? Let's see. Rich, you there? Let me just check. I'm here. I do not hear Rich Scheben at all. I'm looking at the meters. I'm looking at the connection. I'm looking at the bit rate. Okay, so class, there are people who want you to eat bugs. There's no question about that. There are plenty of them. I'm not doing it. We even had an exhibitor at the Get Prepared Expo probably 5 years ago. And, I was walking around as the master of ceremonies, and I smelled this thing cooking. Nobody said, hey, listen, you mind if I do some home cooking here in my booth? I smelled this kind of a awful smell. And, this gal was frying up some bugs and giving them to people to eat. She called me over and said, hey, Vinny, you want to try one? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am not going to eat bugs. And I don't think you should either. Seriously, I don't care how much protein they have in them. I don't care what kind of a delicacy they are in other countries. We don't have to eat bugs yet. We don't have to. But if we're going to eat bugs, Mario Cuomo, why don't you start? Joe, Mr. President, why don't you start? Bill, Jeff, why don't you all start? Camille, why don't you start? Show us how it goes. And after maybe 50, 60 years of you guys demonstrating how good it is for us, maybe we'll consider it as a last resort. Class, thank you so much for being with us. Rich Scheben, thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow, Gwyneth Isaacs will be here, and then Kyle and I will be talking about tips from the book.